Yo, what's up? All right, we're back in with another video. Today we're going to kind of switch up the style of the video. So instead of kind of talking about like what you can do to improve your gameplay or maybe some tips, instead we're going to be doing a VOD review. What I did was I timed an Ara-Kara 14. I know it's not the highest Ara-Kara that's been timed. I think there's been 15s that have been timed, but I'm actually pretty proud of this Ara-Kara 14. And I think more than anything, there's actually a lot of unique tech and like unique strategies that we've actually implemented into our Ara-Kara route that can maybe be interesting for players who are looking to elevate their game. I don't think this is like the most reasonable route to be like playing in a pug or anything like that, but I'm going to spend some time to kind of review just what we're actually seeing inside of this Ara-Kara 14 and some of the tech and stuff like that that we saw whenever we were doing this dungeon. Right off the bat here, you actually see that I'm tailoring 25, and I wanted to test something. So you see that I have this extra action button right here. This is attached to the tailoring strand. And we actually didn't know coming into this dungeon if it would be kept upon dungeon start. Now it is. It is kept up on dungeon start. This is probably one of the least useful things ever. But whenever it's kept up on dungeon start, this is pretty nice because our first pull is the standard high key first pull for this dungeon, where you pull all of this trash up to the left side and you lust and you try to burn down this mini boss with lust and all of your offensive CDs. Now having a 12-second tailoring stun is phenomenal for being able to just, stun this mini boss that you see on screen right here. But I'm going to do something that's also a little bit unique here, and I'm going to press a pressing roar right on this target right here, and you can see that a pressing roar debuff is applied to this mini boss. And what this does is it turns it from a 12-second stun to an 18-second stun. And so now we basically don't even have to kick this guy for most of this pull. We press our lust. I pop all of my cooldowns here. I'm going to be a deep breath. I have pre-tipped the scale, so I also fire breath the pack, and then I'm spreading my bombardments. I actually mostly put my bombardments on the mini boss here. But this is a situation where we have basically locked down this mini boss for 75% of the mob's HP, and then we just absolutely smoke the trash. This is a pretty small gain, all things considered, but it allows us to have better melee DPS uptime as well, because they no longer have to dodge the frontal from this mini boss. And that's a pretty strong thing. Now, something that you've already noticed here probably is the composition that we're running. We're running double shaman, so we're running an enhance and an Ellie shaman, a frost death knight, a prot warrior, and an og evoker. So we actually have a decent amount of poison cleanses. And our next pull is like 7 crawlers. And so having double poison cleansing totem is a huge benefit to these crawler pulls, because these crawler pulls are absolutely absurd. They do so much damage to you. And my general thought process whenever I'm looking to personally dispel players is, first off, we're poison cleansing totem pretty early, and so I do my dispels fairly early, and then we drop the poison cleansing totem. But for the DK and the warrior, I try to leave those poisons on them as long as possible, and by leaving those poisons on them as long as possible, those two players are the least susceptible to dying. DK is unkillable, and but me and the two shamans are very scared here, and so we drop our poison cleansing totem, and then my cauterize and just my dispel, and I'm just trying to dispel as many of these debuffs off as possible. And this is pretty scary, but it's not the end of the world. Next up, you see that we're going to this next mini boss, and I have gotten another tailoring buff. I walk over here and grab another one in the meantime. Not like a huge deal. And this one's going into this mini boss as well. Similar thought process to the one before. This mini boss, the tailoring buff works a little bit differently. If you actually cast the tailoring buff like right after the first tick of the AoE of this mini boss, then he doesn't recast. In general, I am probably not going to be doing this here. We're going to get one of the AoEs almost regardless, and we don't necessarily want like partial ticks of the AoE just in general. So I just, I'll just rip this stun a little bit early. I forget to a pressing roar because I'm an idiot, but we end up having this mob stun for 12 seconds as opposed to the 18 that we could have had it stunned for. And so, then we just, I prop my Breath of Eons. We have our Breath of Sindragosa and our Pillar of Frost running. And I actually pre-Zephyr coming out of the stun because I know that the AoE is going to come out very fast. And so I pre-Zephyr. I press my scales as well, just to make sure that I'm going to have a massive DR from this AoE, because on a 14, this mini boss absolutely can smoke you. And then we have 20 seconds until the next cast. And so this mini boss is just completely has been erased. Now we go on to the melee killer mini boss. We have 2 deaths to our melee. Sometimes your melee die on that pull. It is what it is. Now, What I've seen a lot in the comment section on a couple of other videos is talking about having a full melee composition on this boss. I want to kind of talk about our thought process and how we're actually dealing with, dealing with these adds. In general, we found it to be like a severe loss of boss damage whenever we had both of our melee DPS getting off the boss and going and hitting the adds. Instead, what we decided is that our DK, instead of waddling across the room and hitting the adds the entire time, it was just going to hit the boss like 100% of the time. And basically, whenever I'm like committing mass eruption or something like that to the adds, it was overkilling them, especially whenever we have both of our DPS on it. So instead, I'm actually on an Aug Evoker going to be trying to contribute a lot more damage to these, and it's basically just going to be me and the Enhancement Shaman. And now we're going to be dropping CC effects. I'm going to walk in and tail swipe occasionally. We're going to be throwing a pressing roar plus capacitor totem every single time these adds spawn. We have Earthbind totem down. We even get like a D&D as well while the DKs just continue to hit the boss. And you see that I'm trying to get as much cleave as possible. So I even will Breath of Eons on top of these mobs, and then I'll tips my fire breath here. And what I could do is I could then just start casting on this boss. And the adds are kind of low, and so I don't need to necessarily eruption them. In theory, I could have saved my mass eruption, but they were getting a little bit close, and so I was a bit scared. And so then we start utilizing our offensive CDs like that, where we're trying to keep the adds as close to the boss as possible. I wouldn't recommend doing this in like a pug, but this is like the difference between probably like a 3-minute and 3.5 minute encounter to a 4.5 minute encounter whenever we're playing it this way. And we're trying to keep the boss as close as possible to the adds, just so that the Enhancement Shaman can then get back on the boss right after killing these. And kind of like I was saying earlier, I go upheaval, then we get a capacitor totem on these adds, and then I double mass eruption the adds, and they just kind of get evaporated by being the Enhancement Shaman. All at the same time, the DK is just constantly hitting the boss. Now, of course, this looks a little bit worse for the DK on the damage meter, but who cares about damage meter? We care about killing the boss, and then we end up getting this boss killed off in about 4 minutes. So there's a threshold. It's about 20-ish% on this boss where we decide to all in the boss. And what will typically happen is I'll just like landslide the mobs and leave them as far as possible. And then we just like all in the boss. We can then slow them or cap totem them and stuff like that. But it's not like the end of the world. So we get that boss killed off. And now we're moving on to the second area. The second area has a lot less cool tech, I would tend to say, than the first area. There's not like a bunch of tailoring stuns that I can utilize in like weird ways. But something that we have noticed is, first off, these web mages, these bloodstained web mages, are pretty interesting. Now, they cast Web Bolt on the players, and Web Bolt is the most dangerous cast that these mobs have. They also have a volley cast. It's called like Frothing Volley, I want to say. Now, the Frothing Volley cast is a 4-second cast that can be stopped, but whenever it's stopped, it obviously will recast. Anytime these web mages start their... it's called Revolting Volley. Anytime these web mages start their Revolting Volley cast, then we'll utilize a bunch of CC on them. You see, I'll tail swipe there, and then we'll get them knocked up. Then we'll use our other shamans, like knock up or something like that. Additionally, we actually have no issues of letting that Revolting Volley cast go off. Now, most volleys in World of Warcraft are incredibly dangerous. This one is like a medium difficulty heal absorb style effect that requires basically one chain heal from your restoration shaman to be able to deal with it and kind of get it under control. And so you'll see this in the future whenever we pull the double web mage pull, kind of what that looks like whenever we let it go off. But just know that you actually shouldn't be concerned, assuming that your healer has the situation under control. Letting that volley go off isn't even like the end of the world. Now here we have this alarm beetle pulled into the pack. I am the main person who is responsible for dealing with this alarm beetle. I have Sleepwalk, I have Tail Swipe, I have Push, Wing Buffet Push, I have Upheaval. I have more than enough tools to CC this alarm beetle for enough time. What I typically will rotate, and it's kind of similar to what we saw from, like Blackrock Hold, is I'll go Sleepwalk, you can see it right there, I'll go Sleepwalk and then I'll go Upheaval, and I'll go Sleepwalk and then I'll go Tail Swipe, and then I'll go Sleepwalk and then I'll go Wing Buffet. And it works something similar like that, and then I have like 6 CCs in a row, or 7 CCs in a row that I can necessarily press on these alarm beetles. And if I get any other, CC, say I call for a knock up or something like that from the remainder of the group, and we end up getting that also will reset the pull. This pull here is scary. And it's scary not because the Blood Guard, although the Blood Guard is pretty annoying because it puts a 50% DR on all the surrounding mobs. This pull is scary because we have double Web Mage, like we've talked about earlier. And the Web Mages are the most dangerous mobs in these pulls. And we actually end up electing to lust this. We haven't necessarily been lusting this in the past. We've been lusting the second boss of this dungeon. But we just kind of on the fly called to lust this pull here because we are worried about like wiping to a bunch of casters going off. And so basically what's going on here is if any of the casts go off while the Blood Guard is AoEing, you can just basically die. And so we get our kicks. It's the 2 shamans on one of the Web Mages, me, the DK, and the warrior tank on the other Web Mage. And what we'll do is basically we'll throw a bunch of kicks, and then I'm responsible for calling like a stop rotation, right? And how our stop rotation typically goes is we'll go cap, knock up, cap, knock up. At some point, my knockup is going to be used and my upheaval is going to be called. And then we can use a blinding sleet or a shockwave if we feel that it's necessary. But again, look at these revolting volleys. 4-second casts, like I was talking about earlier. And it's really, really important that you actually start interrupting them on that revolting volley cast because it reduces the amount of kicks that you are actually required to get on the entire pull. And you can see here, we just like start throwing all of our knockups because they're on a 25-second cooldown. And so the shaman knockup is incredibly valuable. And so putting that on CD, and that's the revolting volley going off that I was talking about earlier. And putting that shaman knockup on CD is pretty solid. And let's just look back. So this revolting volley is going to be going off here. Look how fast it gets cleansed off by our shaman healer. Half a second. He's like pre-casting like a chain heal on all of us. Where he presses downpour or something like that, and he's able to get topped up almost immediately, and that's impressive, right? And that's kind of why you need to. I think in a situation like that, you need to make sure that none of the casts are going off whenever the Blood Guard is up, because the Blood Guard AOE in conjunction with those bolts is brutal. And so then we kind of go along here. We're going through this section. And here's the next piece of tech that I think is absolutely phenomenal here. DK has a talent called Subduing Grasp at the bottom of the class tree. If you focus grip a target with a different target targeted, it will put the Subduing Grasp debuff onto that target and pull them. It's kind of what we saw whenever I was talking about pulling through the Mists of Tyr and Scythe Maze a couple weeks back, if you guys remember that video. We are utilizing it here. Now, the second boss of this dungeon actually will snap you into the boss arena. And so as this Web Mage gets low, okay, the downside is that if you actually don't have this trash killed off, it'll reset the boss. So you have to be able to have this trash pack like really low. Or in this case, the Web Mage is at 11%. And so then our DK walks up and does the focus grip that I was talking about. They grip that Web Mage. Now the boss has been activated, and you can see that indicated over here on the right side. The boss walks up and is kind of looking at us for a second, and then we get snapped into the boss room. And this saves us, I don't know, probably 10 seconds. So it's not even like the end of the world, but it saves us about 10 seconds, and we just get teleported into the boss room, and we are owning this boss. All right, let's talk about moving forward. Don't really have too much to talk about with this boss. This is a pretty scary part of the dungeon, and it's a pretty scary part of the dungeon for one specific reason, because your tank is slowed. We use a couple of different things. We have Jetstream from Windrush Totem, talented by our shamans. So you can see this debuff right here from these reinforced drones that it's applying to your tank. Basically, it's a slow. And your tank is not able to get out of the Overseer's web circles. It's a pretty toxic mechanic, all things considered, because they are basically rooted. And so they can get out, it's like a 99% slow, and they can get out in a few different ways. First off, if they're like a DK, they could press Death's Advance or something like that. In this instance, a warrior could heroic leap or intervene to players, but intervene is pretty sketch, especially since those webs come out and you only have like 4 seconds or 3 seconds to actually move. And so we just are making sure that we are always having an intervene target for our warrior to be able to charge to. And you can see right there, he intervened to me. He ends up, just like kind of sitting in the middle of the room, and he's kind of stuck. I don't even think we actually end up pressing Windrush Totem on him here. I'm trying to see what we even press here, because he's like he's rooted for all intents and purposes. It doesn't look like he actually even intervened to somebody. I actually don't know how he got out of that. Probably heroic leap. He might have avatar or something like that to break the root. But that pull is incredibly scary for your tank, especially whenever you have those drones constantly slowing the tank. All right. Now you see me grab another one of these the Silken Stun debuffs. And so my Oppressing Roar is 35 seconds up. And this is a pull that is very uncommon for high-end groups. Most high-end groups, they run straight down the left side or straight down the right side, and your tank has to play How do I get away from these reinforced drone simulator and not get killed by the overseer? We have decided that this hauler is on the menu. And this hauler with this wing carrier pull is fucking scary, by the way. These wing carriers actually do just a jillion damage to you. And this hauler has an infinitely stacking debuff. Basically, whenever the hauler does this massive slam, it gains a debuff where, first off, it stuns you for 2 seconds, which is pretty obnoxious. But it's an infinitely scaling damage amp on that slam. And it's not removable. And the mob casts it every 15 seconds, so halfway through the cast. And so we were sitting here thinking, is this hauler actually oppressing roarable? Now, we tested this in an M0 beforehand, so we already know the answer. The silk stun lasts a minute. It's a minute. It lasts a minute. So we were thinking about going to 3, but we realized that we could only reasonably go to 2. And so then I oppressing roar and stun this mob. I know that the cast isn't going to happen immediately. It's also like a little bit over a 2-second cast. And so I know that I can stun this at 18 seconds or like 20 seconds, and we're more or less fine on getting this hauler's debuff reset. And this is the only way that we know of that we can actually reset the hauler stacks. And this makes this mob a lot more on the table, because now instead of going and getting a 3rd or a 4th stack that would end up insta-killing us 100-0, we go 2 stacks. We go 1 stack, and then we press the defensive on the 2nd stack. We reset it. We go another 1st stack, and then we press defensive on the 2nd stack, and we never get a 3rd stack of this from this hauler. And it's honestly just a great pull. It's incredibly count efficient, but the scary part is that the hauler has that infinitely stacking debuff, but we have actually eliminated that from being even a possibility. Actually, we even are going to get a 3rd stack here, but we're never going to get a 4th. A 4th is going to basically one-shot me 100-0. And so even through like a 40% DR, I'm like incredibly scared we even drop our AMZ, because we know that that's like the last part of this boss that's sus. This last boss is one that I also see a lot of comments on, saying that pugs have it impossible. I think if you're in a coordinated group, and look at how our melee are pre-spreading. Let me take it out full screen so I can draw on the screen real quick. So our melee, hold on, let me play it that way. There's like a lot going on the screen right here. Our melee are triangled up. So one melee's here, one melee's here, and one melee's here. 1, 2, 3. So the way that they're going to be shooting their puddles, they're basically never going to be overlapping their puddles here. So this one's shooting here, this one's shooting here, and this one is like shooting through the boss, but it's not at this guy, right? And so the way that they're triangled up, it allows them to almost instantly drop Poison Cleansing Totem from one of the shamans on every single set. Of course, I'm going to be standing at range and just dispelling myself. If ever my waves are going to be going through the boss, I just call out wave through the boss, and then it's not that big of a deal. Obviously, that's like a high-end coordinated group thing, because these players are, first off, they're waiting like 2 seconds to press the Poison Cleansing Totem before, basically the melee shaman, it's his job, it's his responsibility here to be like, I need this Poison Cleansing Totem. And so then then it gets pressed to make sure that everybody is in position to be able to deal with it. And looking at it right there, again, they're triangling up and making sure that they're never going to overlap where their waves are. And they do a great job. It mitigates the amount of damage taken on this fight by an insane amount. And we are able to then go on and time Ara-Kara 14. And we have a decent amount of time left. We have 2 minutes left over with 5 deaths. We could easily time a 15 if we were able to get this key and replicate this run. And I've been super happy with how I've been performing this season. I hope you guys will come and check out my stream as well, where we kind of been just doing keys, whether it be pugging or pushing high keys every single day. So if you enjoy that kind of content, come check out the stream, and I will see you guys in the next video.